Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today, for context, we are on this channel called Dequitem, and for what I can read, he is an armor, a fighter and filmer of non-choreographed night fights. Fantastic. Already just by a very quick glance at his channel, I see it's absolutely the type of stuff that I like. Wow, look at that. Mace of Sword, the best knightly shield. Love that. Poleaxe tutorial. I love that he's in armor on every single video. Goodness gracious, that's dedication. There are plenty of other videos that look really interesting. For instance, the Norman Knight High Medieval Male Armor versus Medieval Plate. Well, my money's on the plate guy. Is he wearing a brigandine? I think he is wearing a brigandine. And then what else have we got? High Intensity Blood Flowers. That's oh my gosh, that's I gotta see that very quickly. Not the whole video. Just want to see it. Man, that looks, the filmography is incredible. Look at that. Man, the graphics. Yeah, high production. I need to start doing something like this. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, this one is like... For this one, it looks like they went to some kind of castle. Man, next time I'm in Europe, I need to do this. Very cool, very cool. Awesome. Anyways, the video that I would like to provide commentary to and react to today is called The Best Knight Helmet. So what's the best helmet and why is it the armet?
What is a perfect helmet for a tournament or a duel to the death? Let's talk about the safest and the most comfortable knight helmets. In the course of the late Middle Ages and the early modern period, numerous helmets were made for war and tournaments. Basically, a knight always had to decide whether to choose open or closed helmets. In battle, it's important
that one looks
to
amazing.
breathe well, to see as much as possible, and to...
Look at this piece of iconography that he's just chosen. By the way, these helmets look great. He's the maker, I believe, so he's doing a fantastic job. Look at that one. So isn't it interesting that when you look at this piece of iconography, one thing that you see right off the bat is that there are a few frogmouth helmets, but this is a battle scene. I can see at least three. There's one here, and one here. And this really counters this idea that people keep pushing that frogmouths are only for jousters or for the joust tournament and whatnot. Look, there is another one down here. So that's not the case. There is so much iconography everywhere in all sorts of countries that this cannot be excused as a situation whereby, or maybe the artist didn't know. No, I think the artists knew exactly what they were doing, and frogmouth helmets were sometimes chosen for war, even though they will become eventually specialized jousting gear. Yeah.
And to hear well, open helmets or open their visors in battle.
Yeah.
In tournaments, however, the majority of knights wore helmets that were as secure as possible. However, the strong padding also has disadvantages. The more padding, the larger and heavier the helmet becomes. On one hand, this increases the load on the spine. On the other hand, the body center of gravity shifts upwards and the lever in wrestling changes.
Very interesting point.
Duels against only one opponent, the use of less padding is possible. Since I don't use extreme padding on my own helmets, I can clearly prove that powerful blows against the helmet can be effective, even with swords.
Ooh.
So each helmet should have at least 1 to 2 centimeters of padding, and made from hardened steel, to more safely simulate harness fencing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, not everyone could afford hardened steel in the medieval period, and we know that if you were to look at, not that that's what he's saying, I'm just expanding, if you look at the sort of variety of composition of steels, irons, and in general metallurgy within a medieval battlefield, and even in the joust, it would have been a spectrum from just simple iron all the way up to low carbon, medium carbon, and even high carbon steel for armor. And of course, in the mid-range, which would be the most optimal, normal. You had heat-treated steels. You would have normalized steel. So yeah, it varies a lot with the economic power and backbone of a person, and even personal choice, also design choices. This is why you do have, believe it or not, a king that we know was wearing a helmet for the joust that was made of iron. And you might think, well, how? It's a rare occasion, but it does happen. We still have the helmet. And you might think, but why wouldn't a king get a medium carbon heat-treated high quality steel? Why just iron? And the reason is, well, they chose to go with a thickness that was so crazy that you didn't need, at that point, heat-treated steel. In fact, probably with that level of thickness, nothing is going through that thickness of iron. Of course, that wouldn't really be viable for a long war, but for jousting, considering you just have to go at each other a few times. Plus, he's the king. If he's tired, he can stop anytime he wants. He's in charge. Yeah, they chose to go for that, which is an interesting choice if you think about it. Yeah.
Especially when we want to simulate.
This is an amazing shot, by the way, and I know it must be freezing cold in that armor. Although then again, armor does keep the heat in. So I remember when I went to film a little bit of videos, a few videos up in the mountains, and it was snowing like this. It was nice to wear the armor, and I was the least affected of my whole team, and they were wearing modern winter clothing, believe it or not. So I think armor does help. But my hands, oh goodness gracious, my hands were really hurting, which is probably what's going on here. Talking about that, before we continue, I actually found some unpublished footage of behind the scenes during one of these very cold days in samurai armor that I filmed a few years ago with part of my team. Yeah, that team that doesn't exist. Rolling my eyes. Let me share this with you, and then we continue. Also, what he said now, that knights do choose sometimes to fight with the visor up, is absolutely correct. And even though it may sound counterintuitive, because as modern people, I think oftentimes we put the risk factor as the primary element when we imagine what I would do in a battle situation, in a duel situation. But the reality of fact is that medieval people had a completely different conception of risk acceptance. And these are people that go into the military, and that is a massive difference, isn't it? I mean, we are reenactors and people that enjoy fighting as a sport. For them, it would be instead the equivalent of a modern Marine Corps. And how many things and how much risk does a real soldier, when they walk around and there is a possibility of a minefield, when they are engaging enemy in combat, shooting at each other, all of that is risk that a reenactor wouldn't want to take. Likewise, medieval knights would take risks that we wouldn't take as reenactors, precisely because they were the military of the time. And also because, of course, vision, ability to breathe are extremely important. For example, if there is an enemy archer just looking at you, you might want to get the visor down.
The fight of knights today, it is important to protect ourselves as best as possible.
Yeah.
With open visors or gaps in the armor and padding, we have to keep a low profile and acquire flaws in the fighting style and practice of historical techniques. So what is a perfect helmet for a harness fencer?
Man, this is beautiful.
The majority of harness fencers use the so-called schaller. The schaller were very popular in late Middle Ages because they represent a compromise between a safe and comfortable helmet. The head stays movable, even though the neck area is protected by a sturdy collar.
Yeah.
In tournaments, however, the helmet is still rarer than the general prevalence of the schaller on battlefields would suggest.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the salet in this case, or the sallet, but regardless, the point he made, the fact that in jousting it's a little rarer to see even today, although there are some jousters that do wear the salet and bever combination, but I think one of the reasons why it is a little bit of a dangerous choice, and it's definitely not what I would choose if I were to joust, I would definitely go for a frogmouth, is because the simple fact that a salet bever combination is made of two separate pieces, sometimes three if you consider the visor section. The more separate pieces you have that are somewhat movable, the more in danger you could be in the case of a full-on lance hit to the face.
Reasons for these are the visor slides. Due to the shape, stabs reach the eyes more quickly than with other visors. Also, the mouth and nose area is more often not securely closed. Part of the helmet is only attached to the head. The force of blows is directed to the spine, and injuries are more frequent than with other helmets.
Yeah.
Several tests have shown me that shullers are too unsafe for hard harness fencing.
Again, he means salets. That is one of the reasons why the frogmouth will become so popular with jousting knights, kings, princes, and high nobility, because you have one solid plate that is also deflecting in a way because of how it's constructed. So it's really difficult for a lance to get a good grip on the front plate of a frogmouth. But when it comes to a bever, which would be the only protection of the lower face, unfortunately what can happen is that you get hit at full force, and if the lance hit connects properly, they can still break your jaw, literally shatter it in pieces. It would save your life because obviously without a salet the lance would go into your mouth or pierce your throat, so it would save your life, but you know, it's something that I personally wouldn't do it. I know there are people that do it, and I'm also aware of people that sustained this sort of injuries because they chose that, which is one of the reasons why I prefer the frogmouth. Another type of injury that you could encounter if you're wearing a salet bever combination as opposed to a solid frogmouth is the fact that a frogmouth, when it's worn for the joust as opposed to for war, it's usually secured, sometimes bolted directly on the breastplate and backplate, and other times, like in my case, with leather straps. That level of security means that when you're wearing that sort of frogmouth, your head literally cannot move as much because the helmet is strongly secured as a single unit that is not able to move as much, as opposed to if you're wearing, for example, again, a salet bever combination. What happens is that when you get hit, your head will be strongly pushed back, and that can cause some spinal injuries as well. It is very likely, however, that when frogmouths were worn during battle, they weren't secured, and in fact, they would be worn with a little bit of a gap so that they would be suspended, and the reason for that is because, of course, there is a disadvantage when it comes to, there is unfortunately a disadvantage that comes with the idea of securing the helmet and bolting it, and that is, you really can't move that much. You have to move your entire torso because now your head cannot turn independently. During a joust, not a big deal. All you need to do is look forward, but during a battle you need to be able to look to your side, maybe move a little bit more, and which is one of the reasons why I doubt that helmets would be bolted to the breastplate during a battle. So frogmouths can be used both for war and joust, but the way they are secured and worn are different.
The fewer holes
here it is.
the helmet has, the less likely it is that wood splitters from the lances can get into the holes of the helmet. Therefore, many tournament helmets only had single sides air holes on the side facing away from the opponent. However, in foot tournaments with spears and swords, the risk was lower, and both more and larger holes for air and safety were placed on the helmets. While the throat of a great helmet was only protected by a chain collar of the bascinet under the great helmet, the great bascinets have a stable plate collar.
That was awesome. I mean, these guys hurt each other a little bit, but hey, that's combat for you. I really like the male collar called a standard. I think it looks very elegant. I own one and I've shown it a couple of times with several helmets, in combination with several helmets. But if I were once again to participate into a full contact foot combat tourney or maybe even a joust, yeah, I would want a solid plate once again.
The Great Bascinet is one of the safest helmets of the late Middle Ages. But the helmet anchors the wearer's head to his breast.
Yeah, look at that one. I love that.
The head is difficult. In foot tournaments, many knights prefer an armet or closed helmet.
Right. Interestingly, so did you notice that he said an armet or a closed helmet? Now, some armor enthusiasts correct him and they will tell him, no, a closed helmet is one thing because it's the kind of helmet that opens in the front, whereas the armet is the helmet that opens to the sides. Even though that's true, I wouldn't correct him, and the reason why I wouldn't correct him is because in period sources, they are all called armets or armet. There is no closed helmet as a separate category from an armet in period sources. So if you read medieval sources, it's all armet. So the way that he said, absolutely fine from that point of view, which is why it's good and practical to distinguish the two for students of armor. But we shouldn't be too pedantic when it comes to this, because once again, it is not incorrect to name a closed helmet an armet, because in period, they will be the same thing.
Armet, or the so-called closed helmet, the neck is completely exposed and must be protected by an additional collar.
Depending on the model.
In the 15th century, mainly chain collars were used. The helmets of the 16th and 17th century
Dark Souls
were mostly connected with rigid plate collars. Of injury with a chain collar is quite high, so I attached additional plates under my chain collar to protect my lyrics. Even these were unhistorical.
I think he's German.
My closed helmets are based on the helmets of some historical fencing sources.
That looks awesome.
The visor consists
this one is my
of
favorite.
breathing and side holes that are too narrow for blade tips. Armets, closed helmets, and great bascinets have examples for perforated helmet visors. Nevertheless, many tournament helmets have narrow viewer slides, of which the edges were bent outwards to deflect most of the thrusts.
And sometimes when you look at the way asymmetry in armor works with helmets, this is not always the case. Like this one is symmetrically perforated, as you can see, but sometimes there is asymmetry. And when there is asymmetry, you will always notice that the left side will be solid. I think this is the case here, while the right side will have some perforation. And that is because statistically, mathematically, the likelihood while you are facing a right-handed individual or opponent to hit you on the right is lower than the likelihood of being hit on the left. One, because the left is the side that you usually present to an opponent when you fight, but also because of the way we naturally swing. Now, clearly, it depends how you swing. You will hit the other side. But at the end of the day, that's a compromise that medieval knights were ready to take. They wanted more solid defense on the left side and a little bit more breathable plates on the other side.
In the context of modern martial art, I therefore advise against any wide viewing slides that can be pierced. Same for visors. They must be fixable. On one of my helmets, you can see a historical closure with a safety pin.
Yeah, I have
order to protect
something like that.
the head efficiently, strong padding is important, especially for Buhurt sports. Helmets.
I was gonna say, so in Buhurt, I do believe that they go the extra mile when it comes to padding and thick padding under plate. I do not believe that's historical. This is not an insult. If you're doing Buhurt, well, you should follow the rules of your sport, and which absolutely fine. But sometimes I think whenever you look at iconography and whenever you look at real armor from period, in the sense armor that was actually used by medieval knights and medieval men at arms during war and during tourneys, the profiles is always thinner. And that's not just because you might think, well, maybe because medieval people were smaller, caged. It's not just that. It's just that they wouldn't put as much padding as we do today. I absolutely understand safety, and the safety is important. But at the same time, it's important to keep in mind that an excessive padding is not historical. So if you're doing full content combat sport, absolutely go ahead, knock yourself out with the padding. I want you to be safe. If you're doing historical reenactment, I wouldn't do that, because you want to present a more realistic image that is more representative of, once again, how medieval form looked in conjunction with acceptable function.
Are padded beyond the historical level to avoid concussion. I hope I was able to introduce you to a pair of safe medieval helmets for foot tournaments, and forgive me for not having big respect for the salad. If you
No
have a
problem.
different opinion, then feel free to drop it in the comments. Meanwhile, thanks to my Patreons for your support.
Very, very cool guy. Okay, so that's Dequitem for you. Just wanted to react to one of his videos. Anyhow, as usual, I don't want to kind of keep watching and watching and watching because I want you to go and check out his content and subscribe and finish watching these videos. But he's got a lot of stuff in armor, and I love the fact that he films these in like in scenarios. These look like diorama, how do you pronounce it, but with real people, and I really, really appreciate that. And I want to hope to, because I used to make content like this when I was like wearing armor and putting on the armor and go to the places, go to the forests, go to the ancient Roman areas. And since I moved to the States, I don't have the same team of people. I still have the team in terms of researchers, but I don't have team in terms of people that can pick up 2-3 cars, bring up the gear, a cameraman, audio technicians, that they can all come with me and we can go and film stuff. Of course, not in medieval. There's no medieval castle or ancient Greek temple in America. Or there are reproductions, I suppose. That could be still cool. But still, I think it would be nice in forests and natural environments to start doing some kind of content like that. But I do need a little time in order to be able to create a little bit of a team, if you will. Anyways, in the meantime, while you wait for me to get my life together, why don't you go and check out his channel? He's got quite a lot of videos that are pretty cool. He's got some members-only content as well, and I really think that it's worth a watch. Not only because he appears to be experienced in using this stuff, but he makes it. So I always have a lot of respect for armorers, people that not only understand armor like a historian would, or like someone like me who studies it, but they understand it in its very origins and genesis, because they make it. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you Dequitem for the content, and I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.